"You can sleep in the guest room from now on," Richard said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. He just said it like he was commenting on the weather. Calm. Final. His daughter Patricia didn't flinch. She stayed seated in my chair at the head of the table where I'd sat every Sunday for the past 20 years, stirring her tea like it was just any other evening. Like I wasn't still in the room. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask if she'd be staying long or if he'd lost his mind or if I was supposed to pack up my life and pretend this was normal. I stood, took my glass of Pinot from the table, and walked out to the porch. The air outside was cooler than I expected. Sharp. I could hear the sound of sprinklers misting over the back rows of vines. The same vines I'd planted myself in 1995, the year my daughter Emily turned 12, back when Richard was still a stranger, and this land was still dirt and potential. I sat on the porch swing and crossed my legs. My knees ached more these days. 30 years of walking this land through wet seasons, dry seasons, and harvests that nearly broke me. The porch light cast a yellow glow on the railing. From here, the vineyard looked like a painting. Quiet rows stretching toward the valley. Nothing looked out of place. Not yet. But inside that house, something had shifted. First, it was Derek asking questions about distributors and margins. Then Patricia bringing insurance adjusters under the pretense of wildfire preparedness. Mitchell mentioning e-commerce platforms over dinner, casually slipping in family-run like it was already true. And now, a daughter who didn't grow up here, sitting in my chair in my kitchen, and a husband suggesting I find another room in my own house. I took a long sip. The wine was too warm, but I didn't mind. I wouldn't fight tonight. Not yet. Because if they thought I was just another woman who'd given up ownership when she said I do, they were going to find out just how wrong they were. I bought the first 10 acres with a commission check and a stubborn belief that something better could grow from risk. That was 1993. The land was dry, uneven, and dismissed by 2 other agents before me. I saw what they didn't. I saw potential, not just in the soil, but in myself. Those first years were brutal. I juggled escrow paperwork by day and irrigation trench lines by night. My daughter Mira was 9 when she helped me plant the first rows. I still remember her hands so small tying the stakes. She cried once when a frost ruined half a season's work. I didn't. By the time Mira left for college, I was managing 60 acres. By the time she started her own family, it was over 100. And by the time I met Richard, I had something people in this valley respected: an estate with roots. He was graceful in the way only men with long confidence are. A silver watch. A steady hand when pouring wine. He never asked about ownership. He assumed the way they do, that the land had been passed down, that the name Hemsley Estate had always existed. I let him believe it. Not to lie, but to protect. The truth was, there was no husband behind that name. No family money, just sweat, frostbite, and 100 decisions that no one else could have made for me. When his children started visiting, first with questions, then with comments, I heard what they didn't say. Have you thought about rebranding? Are you optimizing the value of the land? Family operations can be so inefficient. They said family like it was theirs, like they were already written into the deed. I smiled, poured wine, never confirmed, never corrected, because I could feel it, that quiet circling, that casual pressure. But this land had taught me patience, and just like vines take years to prove their worth, so do people. Richard once said, "You must feel lucky to live here." And I remember thinking, luck didn't build this. I did. And I still knew exactly where every deed was buried. It started like a kindness. Just need you to update your life insurance beneficiary, love, Richard said, sliding the form across the breakfast table beside the marmalade. I read it, then read it again. It wasn't just insurance. It included something else, a clause buried on page 3. A power of attorney provision tucked in like a bone under a roast. I didn't say anything then, just smiled and pushed it back. I'll think about it. That's when the tone shifted. He didn't fight. He withdrew. The dinners got quieter. The Sunday porch talks shorter. He started taking calls outside, walking long loops down the vine rows with his phone tucked to his ear. When I passed him one evening near Block 12, I heard it. She won't budge yet. But we'll get there. I stood behind the barn for 10 minutes, pretending to check on irrigation flow just to steady my breath. Then came the visits. Patricia showed up with a man who didn't introduce himself, poking around with a clipboard. Have you had the land appraised recently? Some comparable estates are going for 12, maybe 15 million. Derek emailed, asking for inventory logs. Said he was just curious about seasonal output and margins. Mitchell mentioned he'd drafted a proposal for an e-commerce expansion plan. Said he could help digitize the brand. Brand. I didn't sign a thing. I didn't even let them into the winery office. But I did one thing quietly. I called Miranda Langston, my estate lawyer for over 20 years, and asked her to verify every title, every deed, every county filing. 2 days later, she called back. Lorraine, something's wrong. I sat down on the edge of the bed. There are filings you didn't make, she said. Transfer documents. Partnership claims. Authorizations you never signed. My throat dried. Are they in my name? Yes, she said, but the signatures, they're not yours. The papers had my name, but not my hand. And I understood in that moment that someone wasn't just testing boundaries anymore. They were trying to redraw the map entirely. I didn't confront Richard. Not yet. Instead, I made a call I hadn't needed to make in years. Tom Reeves picked up on the second ring. He'd been a private investigator long before I left real estate, the kind of man who didn't ask why until after the facts were on the table. I need everything, I told him. Financial history, legal patterns, and his wives. There was a pause. Then, give me 2 weeks. Tom came to the Vineyard on a Tuesday afternoon when the tasting room was closed and the air felt still. He laid the folder on the desk in my office, the same desk I'd sanded and sealed myself the year I opened the winery. I ran my fingers along the grain while he spoke. Margaret Barnes. Married to Richard for 18 years. Diagnosed with early-stage dementia. 6 months later, her house and investment accounts worth over $4 million were transferred into Richard's name. She died less than a year after that. Official cause complications from her condition. Her sister contested the transfer, claimed manipulation, claimed forgery. The case settled quietly. Richard kept everything. Then Helen. Married for 9 years. Active independent. A fall at her vacation home. Property signed over weeks before her death. Her adult daughter fought, lost. Same attorneys, same documents, same outcome. I felt my chest tighten, not from shock, but from recognition. Tom flipped another page. Both families said the same thing he said. That the paperwork didn't match the women they knew, that the timing felt off. I looked around my office, the framed photos of early harvests, the map of the vineyard pinned with colored tacks, the ledgers I'd balanced during sleepless nights. I wasn't sick. I wasn't confused. And I wasn't done. They thought you were next, Tom said gently. I nodded. Because now I could see it clearly. The slow questions, the fake concern. The papers slid across the table like favors. They didn't marry women. They waited for moments of vulnerability. And I knew, standing there with my hand on that desk, that my story would not end the way theirs had, because I was already planning what came next. I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. I called my notary. Then my attorney. Then Tom. We made copies of every deed, every forged filing. Linda time-stamped digital versions and filed alerts with the county clerk's office. Any new documents claiming changes to Morrison Estate would trigger an immediate flag. I want a net, I told her. One they won't see until it's already wrapped around their feet. Then I called Richard. Our anniversary's coming up, I said sweetly. I want to host something special. Let's invite the whole family. He sounded pleased. I think that's a wonderful idea. I'll handle everything, I told him. I invited Derek, Patricia, and Mitchell. I also invited Emily. And 2 more names Richard wouldn't expect: Margaret's sister, Joan, and Helen's daughter, Catherine. Dinner at the estate, I told them. Saturday evening. Dress nice. I didn't explain. I didn't have to. That morning, I walked the vineyard alone. The sun hadn't yet burned off the dew, and the rose shimmered silver with silence. I ran my hand along the vines I'd planted with Emily at my side, her hands smaller than the gloves I used to buy her. Tonight, those same vines would bear witness to something else. I didn't plan a confrontation. I planned a reveal. I had Carlos set up long tables along the southern patio with linen and crystal. I hired a caterer, opened my reserve vintages, staged it all like a celebration. Because it was the end of pretending, the end of walking past whispers, the end of someone else writing a future I built with my own hands. Richard thought I was finally accepting his children, finally merging families. He thought I'd softened. But what I'd actually done was sharpen every edge of the truth and poured it into a glass they wouldn't see coming. By dusk, the candles were lit. The place settings gleamed. The guests began to arrive. And with each footstep on the flagstone path, the weight of what they tried to take came home to them inch by inch, acre by acre. They arrived early. Of course they did. Derek in a tailored suit, shaking hands like a man about to close a deal. Patricia wore a crisp cream blouse, her smile rehearsed. Mitchell trailed behind, already scanning the setup like he was reviewing projections. My wine poured into their glasses. My label on the table. My land under their feet. Happy anniversary, Patricia said, lifting her glass. We've actually brought a proposal, something exciting about restructuring equity. A friend of mine drew up a preliminary term sheet. Emily's hand stiffened around her fork. She didn't say a word, but I could feel her heart pounding through the silver. I stood. I believe the Vineyard team has arrived. The front gate creaked. Linda first hairpinned documents in hand. Tom just behind her, calm as ever. Detective Rowe came next, badge already visible at her hip, and then Joan and Catherine. Richard's face shifted. First, his smile dissolved. His hand froze around the stem of his glass. Lorraine, he said low. What is this? I thought tonight was about family, I replied. So, I invited all of yours. He stood, but I didn't sit. Please, I said. Everyone stay seated. Tom placed a thick folder on the table in front of Patricia. Linda slid 2 sets of documents in front of Derek and Mitchell. Rose stepped forward without saying a word. This isn't how you handle things, Richard said louder now. This is a setup. No, I said. This is my vineyard. That makes this a correction. Derek glanced at his father. Patricia had gone pale. Mitchell said nothing at all. You filed documents with my forged signature. I continued. You entered my office without permission. You made plans to redistribute something you didn't build, didn't buy, and never owned. Catherine, standing beside the detective, now spoke next. She's not the first. And I won't be the last, I said, but I will be the one who fights back. Then Rowe stepped forward and pulled out the warrants. Linda opened the folder with a deliberate calm that made the air feel heavier. The first sheet, a deed transfer with my name spelled correctly, but not signed by me. The second, a power of attorney form, granting Richard access to my accounts. More followed. Emails between Derek and Patricia discussing controlling leverage. Text messages from Richard laying out timelines encouraging them to move quietly, secure equity before she changes her mind. Each document felt like a knife placed carefully on the table. Detective Rowe stood beside Linda and began reading off the charges. Richard Barnes, Derek Barnes, Patricia Barnes. You are under investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of legal documents, attempted misappropriation of property, and elder abuse. Patricia gasped. Derek's mouth opened, then shut. Mitchell shifted in his seat, eyes wide. Catherine stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake. My mother never wanted him to have her house. She told me that when she could still remember who I was. Joan, standing beside her, added, Margaret didn't either. She cried the night she signed those papers. Said she didn't understand what they were. Richard rose halfway from his chair. You can't do this here. This is private. I can. I said, my voice steady. And I am, because this land is mine. Every vine, every barrel, every inch. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. I recognized him now. Linda closed the folder and folded her hands. These documents have been submitted to the district attorney. We have certified handwriting analysis confirming forgery. We have metadata from the county system. We have corroborating statements. Detective Rowe stepped forward. You'll need to come with us now. Patricia started crying. Derek stood slowly, fists clenched. Mitchell stayed seated, silent. Richard didn't move. Not until I said you were right about one thing, Richard. He looked up. You did love something here, but it wasn't me. And then Detective Rowe reached for the cuffs. The sheriff's cruiser turned slowly onto the gravel drive, tires crunching in rhythm with the cicadas. Sunset draped the vineyard in a soft amber glow. It should have been a beautiful evening. Derek's voice cracked first. You think you can get away with this? We'll sue. Detective Rowe didn't even flinch. You've already filed enough false documents to keep a courtroom busy for years. Patricia clutched her wine glass with both hands. This was supposed to be a family celebration. Mitchell stood, then sat again. Hands folded. Eyes down. Richard didn't move. Didn't speak. Until the deputy pulled his hands behind his back. I loved you, he said quietly. I stepped forward steady. No. You loved the land. You loved the idea of inheriting something you didn't build. You loved thinking I'd let it happen. The handcuffs clicked. He flinched. You just assumed I wouldn't fight, I added. But you never asked how many times I already had. The sound of leather soles shifted over gravel as the deputies moved from guest to guest. Catherine and Joan stood together, silent, watching as the past unraveled in real time. Derek was still shouting as he was led to the cruiser. Mitchell gave one last glance my way, more regret than apology. Patricia reached for her purse, then paused. You don't have to ruin us, she whispered. You already did that yourselves. The table still held empty plates, full glasses. A proposal folder. A linen napkin stained with Pinot. No one touched the wine again. As the last cruiser pulled away, Emily stepped beside me. Her hand brushed mine. She didn't speak, just stayed close. The sun dipped below the ridge. Shadows stretched over the western rows. And still the vines stood, untouched, mine. And in the cooling air of that long evening, I turned and walked back inside. 3 months later, the divorce was final. The prenup held without a single crack. I didn't change my name back. I didn't feel the need to erase anything. What mattered was what remained standing. The vineyard stayed quiet through that season. No reporters, no curious neighbors. Just the steady work of pruning, bottling, shipping. The things that had always mattered more than noise. Emily came back in early spring. Not with plans or demands, just a notebook and boots that were already scuffed from her own life. She didn't ask to take over. She asked to walk with me, to learn how I decided when to thin a row, how I trusted my instincts more than spreadsheets. We didn't talk much at first. We didn't need to. One morning, the new sign arrived. I watched the crew set it at the entrance just inside the gate, where visitors slowed down naturally. Clean lettering. Simple. Honest. Hemsley Estate established 1993. No mention of partnerships, no shared names, no explanations. When the crew finished, Emily stood beside me and read it out loud, like she was testing the sound of it in the open air. She smiled the kind of smile that didn't rush anything. "It looks right," she said. "It always was," I answered. That afternoon, we walked the Southern Rows together. She asked about soil variation, about how I handled seasons when nothing went according to plan. I told her the truth, that I adjusted, that I waited, that I never let panic make decisions for me. She nodded, writing things down. As the light shifted, I realized something else had changed. I wasn't guarding silence anymore. I wasn't bracing for footsteps behind me or voices in rooms that weren't mine. The vineyard felt settled, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost, but about what I was ready to pour one last time on my own terms. I still pour the wine myself. Not every day, not every shift in the tasting room, but enough to feel the rhythm of it, the weight of the bottle, the pause before the tilt. It's a quiet ritual now. Not performance, not proof, just presence. The mornings begin like they always did. I walk the rows at dawn, boots damp with dew. I run my fingers along the posts. I once drove into this earth with borrowed tools and blistered palms. No one tells me where to walk. No one asks what I'm doing. Visitors still ask, sometimes their voices light with curiosity. "Is this all yours?" I nod. I don't tell them about Richard, about forged signatures or sunset arrests. I don't tell them about Margaret or Helen or the chair I no longer move back to the table. They don't need that part. What they taste is what I fought to keep. Emily's here most days now. Not to take over, not to rewrite, but to listen. She asks good questions. She double-checks irrigation schedules and samples ripeness with a calm hand. Sometimes I catch her watching me, not with worry, but with recognition. That night, I brought out a single glass. The 2018 Reserve. The vintage we bottled just before it all started to fray. The year I didn't know what was coming, but knew enough to protect what mattered. I sat on the porch, the evening light stretching long across the hills. There was no chair beside mine, no footsteps behind me, no papers on the table, just a vineyard that still answered to my name. I took a sip, let it linger, and in the hush between breaths I tasted it fully, what it means to own something without needing to explain it. What it means to be claimed by no one and still be completely whole.